Hello, hello, hello. This is Keith, and Carmen is not here, as you can see, but this is Courtside with Lawman, myself, and Carmen B. Carmen is off tonight. So I'm going to do a show on the title, like the title says, all about DUIs. So we're going to talk about DUIs from the very beginning and hopefully through the court process and things to look out for, things to watch out for, things that you should do. So let me start by saying thank you for coming here to Courtside with Lawman and Carmen B. And I want to tell you that we have our phone number that you can call in any questions, 916-384-8204. We have our Instagram and Facebook channel at Courtside Channel. It's at Courtside Channel, Facebook and Instagram. And you can email us at courtsidepodcast@comcast.net. So throughout this time, you can chat and throw some comments and things like that, and I'll try to catch them. But I'm going to talk about DUIs today. And one of the reasons is because it's a very common but yet serious matter in terms of criminal justice system. The district attorney offices a lot of times get stipends from the government to prosecute DUIs. In Sacramento County alone, it used to be that we had one DUI court where maybe 40, 50 would be up for arraignment or further proceedings each and every day. So DUIs are prevalent. Most people have picked up DUIs and things like that. So I thought I'd talk about it today and let you know the who, what, whens, wheres, and whys on them. So if you're coming along, come on along. I see nobody's there yet, hopefully, but we'll get someone soon. All right. It is approximately 6:01, and the first thing I got to tell you about DUIs is this. Don't get them. If you can, avoid it at all costs. If you know that you are a person who drinks and drinks maybe too much at any particular time, then you should be cognizant of preventing a DUI, because most of the time DUIs are decisions that are made when you're shocked, when it's right before you. You realize, oh no, I'm going to go home and boom, but I've had all this to drink. Your mind, and the funny thing about DUIs is that it controls your mind to the extent that it makes you believe that you can do things. Alcohol makes you believe you can do things that you can't, and so we make bad decisions sometimes to drive when it comes to that. And those decisions could lead to, of course, arrest and prosecution. Now, sometimes people are in situations where they shouldn't, they shouldn't drive, but yet they may feel a need to drive. Well, I'll tell you, Uber, Lyft, and other ride-sharing organizations and companies tend to help out with that, in that you can get an instant ride from a stranger. It used to be you better know somebody, but you can get a ride from a stranger nowadays, and so there's really no excuse to not get a DUI or to get a DUI. So let me tell you, the first thing about them, okay, is first of all, you've got to drink too much. Part of a DUI is a scientific question. Is your blood alcohol level 0.08 or higher? Now, I say it's scientific because it has to be a 0.08 or higher at the time of driving. And once the officer stops you, you are no longer obviously driving. Or if you have stopped yourself and you are near your car or walking around, you are no longer driving. So the key is that you have to figure out what is your blood alcohol content level at the time of driving. And that's done usually through mathematical equations, a procedure called retrograde extrapolation, which means to go back in time to figure out what a figure was in the future. So retrograde extrapolation is also known as the last gulp defense, something like that, where And I'll explain later what they mean by that, because it's all about alcohol and how it metabolizes in your system. So, first thing about DUIs, don't get one. Avoid one at all costs. But if a decision is made to drive, understand this: it is not illegal to drink and drive in California. It is not illegal to drink and drive in California. A lot of us call it drunk driving and things like that, and we put the buzz driving, we throw these words out there, but it is not illegal to drive with alcohol in your system. Now, the real key is how much alcohol is in your system and how does it affect your ability to drive. And that's the real key, because anyone can have one drink. That one drink is probably going to get you to a 0.02 at most. And depending on the drink, I mean, if you have a double vodka, whatever, something with double the amount of 12 ounces of alcohol, well, then might can get you to a 0.3. But you're going to level out at some point, and you're never going to get higher as long as you stop drinking. At a 0.3, 0.4, you are not under the influence of alcohol at that time. And most scientists will tell you. You may have some small feelings about from the alcohol, but really you're still in control of all of the cognizant things you need to do in order to operate a motor vehicle. So when we talk about a scientific figure, we're talking about what is your BAC at the time of driving. The first thing about driving would be that an officer has to pull you over, or you have to stop, or God forbid, you're in an accident. If you find yourself in those situations, one of the things that you got to know is that an officer is there to do a criminal investigation, just like any other encounter where an officer may be asking you to stop or stop a car and it's nothing to do with DUI. So the first thing that you got to know is that you probably should exercise your rights at that very time. When an officer comes to the window, what's usually going to happen is you will wind down your window and an officer will smell alcohol. Because if you have been drinking that night and around individuals who were drinking, you're probably going to absorb some of the alcohol in the air, period, and through your body. So you may smell of alcohol, especially if the windows in the car have been up and you're driving for some time. When the window come down, the officer will probably smell alcohol. And no matter what he pulled you over for, the rhetoric is going to start with, have you been drinking tonight? Now, that's a trick question because they smell the alcohol and they presume that you have been drinking that night. And they just want to see what you're going to say. But realize that's a moment in time to not incriminate yourself. In fact, you should probably ask the officer the 5 words that I always, am I free to go? And it may seem ridiculous because he just pulled you over, but realize he probably didn't pull you over because he knew you were driving under the influence or possibly doing that. He pulled you over for some violation, some weaving on the road or something else, tail light out. Could be anything like that. So the first words are, well, am I free to go? And the officer is going to say, no, I'm doing an investigation. I'm going to write you a ticket or do this. And then you would politely say, well, to those questions, then I want my lawyer. Now, if the officer believes that you've been driving under the influence, what they're going to do is order you out of the vehicle. So you comply because remember, if you're not free to go, you are now detained. So he has to have an articulable reason why he pulled you over. So he'll ask you out the vehicle and you comply. Probably going to ask for your license and registration, like they should, proof of insurance. And so you would give all of that stuff to them. And what they're going to do is probably walk you backwards, or not backwards, but walk you back between the vehicles and then onto a sidewalk area. And they'll begin questioning more. Where have you been going? How much you had to drink tonight? All these questions. But see, what you have done is you've invoked your Fifth Amendment already. So they should not ask those questions. And if they do, you want your lawyer. There's only one thing that you have to do. One thing, and that's test. You must test. If you're a driver in California, on the back of your application to drive, it says that you will comply with a test if ever asked to do so by law enforcement. So it's a condition of your driving. Most people don't see it, but that's the one thing that you must do. Otherwise, it would be called a refusal. You refuse to test. And that's pretty bad. And I'll explain that later. But now we're in a situation where the officers walked me back, and they're doing that to see how you walk. So if you're in big heels and not used to the shoes and you wobble a little bit, they'll be watching that. But they'll walk you back, and they'll walk you to the side because it's outside the range of the cameras to do the field sobriety test, to talk to you. They may have a cam on themselves, so they're going to record what you're saying. So when you say, I take the fifth on answering all those questions, you can do so because you are now detained. You're not free to go. So, and they're going to ask you those questions. And if you ever got a DUI before, you're going to know all those questions just come out very, very rapidly, and you think that, hey, aren't you going to read me my rights? Well, we've talked about that before. They don't have to read you your rights. And those questions are considered to be investigation questions. So don't answer them. The only thing you have to do is test. And when you test, you do a blood test. So the officer's got you on the side. You're saying, no, I don't want to talk. The officer then is going to say, well, how about engaging me in some exercises in order for me to see whether you're under the influence or not. Now, these are called field sobriety tests. And there's only 3 of them that are sanctioned by NHTSA, which is the National Highway Institute of Driving, something like that. But they control pretty much the roadways and the rules on the roadways. And what NHTSA has done is they've said that 3 tests are pretty much the standards to do. But if you are an adult, if you are not on probation for DUI, you do not have to take these tests. And I advise that you don't, because there are clues to these tests. And what I mean is, first, a nystagmus test, doing this and see if your eyes can follow. First of all, officers don't do them correctly. And so then, because they don't, they're going to say that there were 5 clues, and clues are mistakes that you made. So they're going to maybe have you hold your head back, count to 30, that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that stuff because they're geared for you to lose, okay? You don't know when you're doing wrong. They will say that if you imagine 28 seconds and the cop was at 30, that's a clue that you are not thinking right. When how do you know how fast that person is really, really counting? Say, hold your foot up. People know that. Hold your foot up. They'll ask you to do so. They'll probably demonstrate it for you on how you hold your foot up. Now, if you have aches, pains, injuries, things like that, it may be difficult to do that. And if it's 2 a.m. and cold outside, more difficult. And if you're in high heels, more difficult. So the tests are not geared for you to succeed. They're more geared for you to fail. I'll give you an example. When they ask you to touch the tip of your nose, okay? A lot of people believe that that's this. I've touched the tip. Look at me with my finger. But what they'll probably demonstrate and want you to do is actually touch the tip of your nose. See the difference? But you don't know that. So that would be a failure for that test. Another one is the walk and turn test that they'll have you do. You stand with one foot in front of the other, and you're going to take 9 steps forward, turn around, and they'll tell you turn left, turn right, and then 9 steps back, heel to toe. And they're going to watch as you try to make a straight line, heel to toe. Now, a lot of people will have a trouble doing that with just a regular balance and problems, easy ones, because you don't walk that way every day. You don't practice doing that at all. This may be the first time in your life you're asked to walk that way and to touch your heel to your toe each time you do so. So that's what I mean by they're geared to fail, because you're not used to doing these things all the time. And so you're not going to do them correctly in accordance with the officer. And you'll fail those field sobriety tests, and they'll say that that means that person's impaired. And then, so you refuse them. If you're an adult and you're not on probation for DUI, you can refuse those tests. Just like you can refuse when they bring out a little box and they tell you to blow in it. That box is a preliminary alcohol screening device. And that device is geared to detect alcohol. Now, how much alcohol? Does it have a reading? Does it print out? No, it won't print out. It'll detect something, but only the officer will see it. In fact, most of the time, they'll never tell you what was on the box, because the next thing that's going to happen, if it detects alcohol, is that they're going to ask you to turn around and put cuffs on you. You see, because that will give them now probable cause that alcohol is in your system. Now, drugs, a different thing, way different, because many drugs don't come with smell usually, unless you're smoking weed or something. But I advise you don't do that, even though weed may be legal in the car. But drugs won't come with an obvious smell. And what they'll be looking for is your eyes and the pupils. Are you talking fast? Are you sweating? Erratic behavior that might cause them to believe you're under the influence of drugs. They may believe you're under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And they'll do these similar tests too in order to find out. But you can refuse them as long as you're not on probation for DUI. And you should and forget all the reindeer games, only thing you must do is test. So I will tell you a little secret. If an officer asks you to get out of the car and go do those field sobriety tests, if they put you on the side and they go through the worry of trying to do the test and you tell them no, and then they pull out the box and you tell them no, right then and there, they have to have what's called probable cause to arrest. Many times, just the smell of alcohol is not enough. They want to say that you were unsteady on your feet. They'll want to say that your eyes were red and bloodshot and that your speech was slurred. And they'll use those things to try to say, well, I believe that person, may be under the influence of alcohol. So, but if there's no smell of alcohol, then what are you? You're pretty much just tired, I guess. Red eyes and slurred speech. You're just tired. And it may be 2, 3 in the morning, right? When the cop pulls you over. So you are really tired. You may have been dancing for the last 5 hours. So you're really tired. And it has nothing to do with alcohol or drugs. But at some point, the officer will want to take you in. And to do so, they have to have probable cause to arrest. The less things that they have, the better for you later. And when you run into your lawyer, because they don't have the reindeer games to show. They don't have the little black box to blow in. They don't have the nystagmus test. They don't have that stuff. But they do have you saying, I want a blood test. And that's all you have to say. I want a blood test. Now, let me tell you about that. The law requires them to give you what's called an admonishment. So once you're in custody, like I said, you blow into that little box. If you do that as an adult, they're going to arrest you right then and there. And if you refuse to do it, which you have every right to do, they might arrest you then. But all you want to do is do a blood test. Why? Well, they're going to give you a choice. They're supposed to read you this admonition that says that now that I feel I have probable cause to arrest you, you have to take a test in the state of California. And you do, like I said, pursuant to the back of your license. So you get a choice. Breath, blood. Breath, blood. Some people are thinking, now how does my breath show how much alcohol is in my blood? Well, deep into your lungs, the alveolar section of your lungs, believe it or not, blood is flowing through. And that's what they want, is the breath that's down with that blood in your lungs. And that's why you have to blow. And they will always ask you to blow harder, because they want the breath that's at the bottom of your lungs. But a breath test is a machine, and it doesn't collect your sample. And if the sample is been manually collected, the officer decided how much of the sample he collects. So the breath test machine is a very difficult machine to fight because it's calibrated every day. The results are spit out and there's no sample kept. There's nothing wrong. I mean, if you can't prove nothing wrong with the machine, then the machine is probably going to be viewed as accurate. There are ways of fighting the breath test machine somewhat, but it's really few and far between. You're going to find yourself doing that. So blood is the way. Now, I'm scared of needles, Keith. No way, man. You're not sticking me. Those people could be dirty. They could have anything, AIDS in that thing. No, they don't. No, they don't. They'll call in a phlebotomist. The phlebotomist is the person whose job it is to take blood. They pretty much know what they're doing. They probably came right from a hospital or the medical ward or something like that. They'll use their equipment, take blood. They'll take 2 vials of blood. That blood must have a coagulant in the bottles, and you'll see them probably shake it or something at the end because it has to be mixed with a preservative. Blood is much better because they will not get those blood results for about 3 weeks or so. During that time, if in fact you had a court date, what they would do is just continue that court date till they get those blood results. But you do blood because blood is an easier target to battle. Sometimes, if the blood is held too long, if it's not refrigerated properly for a period of time, then the blood can start to decay. And what happens is you get the wrong kind of gases start coming from the blood. The machine that the blood test is done on, and they do it by machine. They run it through these very hot coils, and it burns up the blood, burns it up until the impurities are gone. And then it tests the blood to see whether it's a 0.08, a 10, or something like that. And they're supposed to do it 2 times. They're dual coil machines, but they use just one. Their machines are designed to do it twice in order to check itself. Just like the breath machine, they're going to have you do it twice, and it should be between 0.02 between the 2 numbers in order to have an accurate reading. So when the officer says you are under arrest for DUI, the first thing they're supposed to do is tell you you have to take a blood or a breath test. Now, what about urine? Well, nope, no urine anymore. Blood or breath. DMV requires that you take the test, so you never refuse to test. Never. Choose blood. Much easier to fight, much easier to deal with. Breath, I have no sample. I can't play with anything but a machine that's calibrated every day around midnight. So they now have arrested me. I've chose blood. They've taken it. What happens? Well, they're going to probably put you in a drunk tank, as we call it, or some tank, and you'll be out of there within hours. Because what they tend to do is they will have people always waiting in order so their BAC can go lower. Because time is the only thing that reduces your blood alcohol content. Time. Alcohol metabolizes at a rate of 0.02 per hour. What that means is it comes in and it leaves at a rate of 0.02 per hour. So I'm going to go out and drink. I drink 1 drink, whatever I have, 12 ounces of a beer, a shot, whatever it is, 1 drink. Within an hour, I should be 0.02 at most. If I start drinking continually, so I'm drinking every half hour, I'm getting a new drink. Now, what you're doing is you're bringing it in, and the alcohol still has to metabolize. And it's going to metabolize at a rate that's unique to you. Have you eaten? Are you tall? Are you short? Are you fat? Are you skinny? What's your race? How does your metabolism work? That's how the alcohol is going to get into your system. So I drink 1 drink every half hour, and I did it for maybe 2 hours. So 2 hours, I had 4 drinks. In that period of time, what you would expect is that I would rush up right to the point oh 0.02, and then it's a half hour. So the alcohol's still really getting in. And then I poured 2 more. Oh, another drink in. So now it's going to hurt, but yet keep going up. So now I might be a 0.03, 0.04 within that first hour. And then what did I do? I pumped in another drink. So 0.06 now, 0.07. So after 3 drinks, I may be near an 0.08, depending on my composition of my body and other factors. But when I put that fourth one in, now it's been 2 hours and I popped 4 drinks in. More than likely, now you're close. You're very close to the 0.08. The thing is, we'll never know what we truly are at any time while we're drinking. But when we stop drinking, once you stop and not bring more into your system, then the alcohol can start following. You see, at a rate of 0.02 per hour. So that's why time is the only thing that eliminates alcohol in your system. So I've been out 4 hours. I've had, I don't know how many drinks. People bought me drinks. I don't know, but I'm still walking. I think I'm great. You know, I may have a toleration for alcohol up to an 0.06 even or something. Hell, real drinkers, you know, they can be a 1.2 and you wouldn't notice. But that toleration does not help you at all. So you got to watch yourself when you're drinking. Once you get up to about the 5th drink or so like that, then you know you're probably near a 0.08. But we will never know because we can't test you right then. Only person who's going to want to do that is the officer when they pull you over. So remember, they pull you over, officer will initiate the conversation somehow by saying, how much have you had to drink? You don't lie and say, I had 1 beer hours ago. What you say is, the 5 words I always teach you, right? Am I free to leave? And the officer will say, no, I'm doing a DUI investigation. Okay, officer, then I will do a blood test. I'm not going to do your reindeer games. I'm not going to do the test because I'm an adult and I'm not on probation. But I will do a blood test. Let's go. Now, the officer at that time may not have probable cause to arrest you. But because you know your rights, they may say, all right, then, okay, we'll arrest you. But you stand your ground. You don't answer all these questions that are going to come at you. How much you had to drink? When? How long? Where were you going? Where were you coming from? How do you feel? All of those things. They're just incriminating questions. So I was silent, kept to my word, arrested me. I went down, did a blood test. When you do blood is much easier to fight than breath. Much easier. Breath test is gone once it's done. Blood test stays around. That's why they take 2 vials. And a phlebotomist is brought in to do it, not just anyone off the street. This person takes blood for a living. So you can be somewhat assured this person knows what they're doing. But during that time period, you're not talking, you're not doing anything but complying with the blood test. Because if you do not comply with either test, if you say no, it will be considered a refusal. And a refusal is something you just don't want. Okay? And I'll explain that. And a refusal is when the officer tells you, please, would you like to take a breath test? And you say no. Would you like to take a blood test? And you say no. The officer say, well, hey, your license might be suspended for up to 2 years if you don't take a test. And I'm going to go get a warrant and take your blood anyway. That's right. They're going to go get a warrant and they're going to take your blood anyway. Now, how do they do that? Well, case law developed where in DUI circumstances, they were considered to be sort of like exigent circumstances. There's an emergency going on. There's alcohol in this person's system. And if I wait long enough, that alcohol will get out of their system. Therefore, I need to test them within 3 hours of the driving. That's the presumption. I have to test that person within 3 hours of the driving. So that's why they'll go get a warrant, and the warrant is easy. They call up one of the judges, 15 minutes, they'll have a warrant. They'll call a phlebotomist in, And if you kick and scream, they'll just tie you down, they'll hold you down, and they'll take your blood. So always never refuse the blood test, because that's the only one you should choose. Now, here's a little quirk in that. Some people think, well, I'm going to take the breath test, right? And you get on there and you start realizing the game, and the game is, ooh, we must need to really, really blow and get that alveolar air that's down at the bottom of the lungs. So you blow, and something comes up and you happen to see it, and it's over 0.01. Oh, I mean, wow. So then you start, just blowing a little bit, and they're like, blow, blow, come on, blow. And the machine goes, invalid. And then they try again, invalid, invalid. But when that happens, the cop is going to call it. He's going to say, okay, you have failed to complete this test. Now you must take the blood test. So you see, and that is true. If you don't take the remaining test, let's say you tried blood and they brought this person in and, you're scared of needles every time they get close. So they go, okay, this is enough. Now you must do the breath test. If you refuse to do the remaining test, it is still considered a refusal. You can say, well, I tried to do it. Too bad. You must complete it. That's why I just get over needles. Let them take the blood. Once they have the blood, their job is to refrigerate it, keep it. Test won't occur maybe 3-4 weeks, depending on the lab. They do it in a machine that can be questionable, but at some point it's going to come back, and you may have your court date. And that's what I'm going to go into now, is that the DUI arrest is over. You've taken the blood. You didn't do the reindeer games. You didn't stand on one leg. You didn't do all of this stuff, because as an adult and not on probation, you do not have to do those field sobriety tests. And you refuse the little black box they give you to blow in, because it's a preliminary alcohol screening device just to check for alcohol. Poo-poo it. All you want to do is give blood. That's it. So I gave my blood. They gave me a little court date as I walked out of the jail. You're going to get a lot of letters now, because there's a bunch of DUI lawyers, a bunch of lawyers who get a list of people who were arrested for DUIs. And they'll send you letters and cards, and they'll tell you, I can represent you for $5.99. I can do this for this and this. You look through them, you sift through them. If you want, you can check the lawyers out and things like that. But I'll tell you this. This is the best way to react. One of the best ways to react. You can call me, and I will tell you, here's what's going on. Lawyers are now seeking your business. Okay. And you can tell a good lawyer from a bad lawyer from the very first start, because you will want to ask them, are you going to represent me in the DMV hearing? You got to ask, because when you are arrested, you're given a pink slip. They'll take your license and they'll give you a pink slip. Read the pink slip. You have to call DMV within 10 days to request a hearing. With that hearing comes a copy of the police report, as well as a stay of any license suspension, meaning it won't be suspended as long as you call DMV and get a hearing, or at least request one. Sometimes DMV will not have the paperwork from your arrest because it's still with the cops. And so they'll just take your information down, and when something comes in, they'll match it up and let you know. So that's the first thing you do. You don't need a lawyer for that. Make sure you do that within 10 days. Call DMV, because here's what's happening to you now. You are now being prosecuted, although you don't have your court date yet, but you are also the subject of what they call the administrative per se procedure to take your license. Your license might be everything for you in terms of driving, especially as a commercial driver. So DMV, they'll give you this pink form, and at the top, you'll notice it's a DMV form, because the officers are notifying DMV of the arrest. They're saying what kind of arrest it is. They're going to give them what's called the DS 367. And that's a 4-part form. That pink form is just one of them. And it's going to have all this information to DMV about this DUI arrest. Because right now you have two things going on. And this is really, really important to know. They're like train tracks. They do not cross. They do not come together. You got a DMV action, admin per se, and you've got a court action going on beyond a reasonable doubt. Two things. If a lawyer wants to represent you in just one, doesn't mention the other, get out of there. They must mention them both. And you might ask how much experience you've had at DMV hearings and what are they all about? Stuff like that. So here's the thing. They better tell you this. Look, DMV hearings are administrative hearings where hearsay is allowed. They are conducted by DMV employees who are not lawyers. They're not versed in the law. They just learn how to conduct a hearing. In fact, I used to train them in the state of California. So that person, though, is going to start the administrative process. The court is the other process, and they're going on at the same time. And like train tracks, they don't cross. They don't come together. So you're battling two different battles. In the administrative arena, DMV's arena, the issues are, did the officer stop you properly? Now we're back to the Fourth Amendment. Pulling me over. Did he pull me over properly? Did they have reasonable suspicion that I violated a vehicle code section to pull me over? In the courts, the very first issue is always, did they have reasonable suspicion to pull me over? So it's the same in both arenas. And if you fought in both arenas, you must win in both arenas. Now, the next issue, probable cause to arrest. Now that you've stopped me, was there enough information, facts derived to give you cause to arrest me? In the court, the same thing. Here's where bloodshot eyes, smelled of alcohol, unsteady on his feet, slurred speech, almost falling down, couldn't do my field sobriety test, blew in the blocks, and it was a 2-0. Okay, I got probable cause to arrest. Now, if you take away the box because you, as an adult and not on probation, you can refuse it. And as an adult, not on probation, you can refuse the field sobriety test. They only have these, what's called objective signs of intoxication, which means you just smell of alcohol, red bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, unsteady on your feet. There could be several reasons for that other than alcohol. And like I said, drugs, even harder to detect. Marijuana, even harder. They may smell it, but they have no idea how much marijuana is in your system in order to affect your ability to drive. And I'm going to get to the law at the very end. So now I'm arrested, right? My DMV, first two issues are the same. Then there's the third issue. DMV only cares about 0.08 or higher alcohol. If it's a drug case, they do not go through the administrative per se process. It is a conviction later in a drug case that puts you affecting DMV because they'll get to know about it and they can take a suspension because of it. So 0.08 or higher. It used to be 0.10. It went down to 0.08 because MAD and a lot of other groups lobbied the legislator to bring it down. But it realized that, well, there's a lot of people who were at 0.10 who were not guilty. 09, you were not guilty. Now you're guilty. So what are we going to do about that? So they've created a fiction, something that you probably heard of called a wet reckless. A wet reckless, you'll never be charged with a wet reckless right off the top. It's a negotiating charge that's in the middle of a DUI and a dry reckless, which is just reckless driving. So those are there for the 08s, 09s, and 10s. So I had a 10. Let's just say that's what it came out to, blood, because I remembered my rules. So the third issue at DMV, 0.10. The third issue over here in court, 0.10, but one other thing. they charge you with what's called 23152A and B of the vehicle code. 23152A or B of the vehicle code. A means this: whatever I put in my system, drugs, alcohol, just alcohol, whatever I put in my system has affected my ability to drive, unlike a sober person. That's what the law says. That's the instruction given to a jury. If you find that this person induced all of this alcohol and then it affected their ability to drive, unlike a sober person, they can be found driving under the influence, under the A count. The B count is just like DMV, 0.08 or higher at the time of driving. Now that's key, because let's say you're feeling it and you pull over. You want to sleep in your car, right? I did the right thing, right? Well, cops come along and they, oh, hey, and you wake up. Your first instinct, oh, move my car? Oh, you start to try and turn it on or something. The cops, whoa, no. And then they say, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sleeping. Why? Because I felt I was getting on intoxicated and I slept. When did you get here? Oh, I don't know. It's had to be like 1 hour now or so. About 1 hour? Yeah. Come on out. Because it's been an hour. They're still going to run you through the testing. They're still going to arrest you. And finding out the BAC at the time of driving, well, they get a presumption that as long as I test that person within 3 hours of driving, well, and they test 0.08, it's presumed you're driving under the influence. Let me say that again. As long as you test 0.08 or higher, and it's within 3 hours of driving, which you would tell the officer that you were doing, they can use that test as a presumption you're driving under the influence. So, that being said, obviously, you don't want to say when you stopped your car on the side of the road if you were sleeping it off. That would be something you might want to take the fifth about. I always say, hey, if you know that that's happening and you pull over, you should probably take the keys out the ignition, put them in your pocket or a purse or hide them somewhere. If you're going to lay in the vehicle, well, they're still going to come by and try to knock on the door. But it'd be better if you're laying in the back seat than in the driver's seat with the seatbelt on. So if you're going to do that, get in the back seat. I always say just get away from the vehicle. Start walking. Get far away from the vehicle so that they don't see anybody in it and have to knock on the window. But they got this 3-hour presumption at the time of driving. So let's say that's not the problem. They pulled me over and here it is. I'm a 1-0, right? Now, remember I told you about how alcohol metabolizes, comes in and leaves. Well, the last gulp defense is all predicated about this. Oh, officer, you want to know what I've been drinking, huh? Well, right before you pulled me over, I had my last drink. I threw down my drink and then walked outside, got in my car, came here. It's been about 15 minutes now since you pulled me over. You're probably going to take another 45, get me downtown. Now it's going to be an hour later. Now, what's going to happen to that alcohol that's in my system already? Well, 0.02 per hour, right? So that alcohol I drank right before the officer got me is still metabolizing. You are still in what's called the absorption phase. It's still going through your body. So you should be higher 1 hour later than you were at the time of driving. So you don't know that. Nobody knows that. That's why you don't answer a lot of the questions, because you can talk your way out of that, even though it may be true. So how you do that? Well, you're going to say, oh, I had 2 beers. When? Hours ago. That's it? Yeah, that's all I had. And then you test a 1-0. Now you're lying. The officer knows you're lying. Court knows you're lying. Everybody knows you're lying because scientifically it wouldn't work that way. That's why it's a science problem. DUIs are a big science problem, and it's at the time of driving. So look how it can work against you. If you say, well, I had that drink and it was about an hour ago, and you test '08. Darn it. Let's see, an hour ago. So I had an hour to absorb it, right? So it's now fully in my system. Now, let's say now the officer pulls you over and it takes another hour to test. You haven't drank in that 1 hour. So what is happening? The alcohol is falling from your system. So that 1.0 an hour later is in '08 when you test, but it's '08 at the time of driving. So they will argue, and any toxicologist will say, well, hey, he said he drank, an hour before. Therefore, that was plenty of time for it to start falling, and he hadn't drank when the cop pulled him over. So it's continuing to fall. So '08 represents the low point. It was much higher than that at the time of driving. See, it's just a little math problem. So because of that factor, you should never offer, what you've had to drink. And if you're crazy enough to do it, then the alcohol should still be on your lips, basically. Hey, you just had that drink, if you've got to say something. So, but it's best just take the fifth. When they start asking you questions about where are you drinking, what are you drinking, how much, where, at, you take the fifth on those. And then the science will take care of itself later when you get your lawyer. I want you to remember, two things are going on: the court and DMV. Now, we talked about the 0.08 or higher at the time of driving. What about drugs? What about drugs, right? Marijuana, opiates. What if that's all I have in my system? Well, if the officer can create probable cause to arrest you, and once again, you take the fifth. Am I free to go? No, I'm taking the fifth. And all I have to do is test. Okay? Remember that. Don't do the Rainer games. Test. Blood only. So now they get the blood results back, and they say, it's got barbiturates in his system. It's got opioids in his system. It's got a little marijuana in his system. A high low of marijuana. How's that? And how much is in his system? Well, it has to be quantified, yes. The test result won't come back for a while because it's going to go to a lab that has to test specifically for drugs. And if it comes back with multiple drugs, it really depends how much of those drugs are in your system. Here's what I mean. Cocaine, methamphetamine, most things like even heroin, marijuana, all of it doesn't leave your system in a day or two. You can use, and it's still there a month later. Small portions, metabolites we call it. But something can be there and show up. So because of that, you don't know whether that affected your ability to drive. And that's what they must prove. There's no 0.08s, no standardized thing with how much of cannabinoid, must be in you in order to affect your ability to drive. There is nothing. Some people say, there's some government studies that talk about how cannabis actually slows you down and may make you a more careful driver. But you don't want to test it out. But you do want to challenge the test results, because if wow, I haven't used anything in 2 days and that's showing up, well, it may be there in your system, but in small, minute amounts that are detected, but not enough to affect your ability to drive. Because they pulled me over for a taillight out. Because they pulled me over because they didn't like the tags that I had, or some other equipment violation, or even a Hollywood stop, or maybe speeding, right? Or running a stop sign even. Because remember the last phrase, affect your ability to drive unlike a sober person. Sober people pick up vehicle code violations all the time and they're perfectly sober. So you've got to do something unlike a sober person, like run off the road, run into things, do something like that. You see, to say that whatever's in your system affected your ability to drive. So you're charged with the A count. It's probably going to be drugs only. And there you have to look at what the say is in your system and quantify. Quantify meaning, wait a minute, that's not that much. It's a metabolite. Okay, well, maybe that's a lot. Right there, that's a lot. But did it affect my ability to drive? You pulled me over for a taillight light out. Or my lights are out. For something had nothing to do with bad driving. So that's why you always got to be cognizant in DUIs, okay? Because they're going to hurt you in the future. You pick up a DUI, and like I said, what's going on? DMV is trying to take your license. The court is trying to take your freedom. They run together, but not together. They don't come together. They run together. You fight both arenas. You have to win in both arenas. Any lawyer that doesn't represent you for both, you got to run out the office. They'll send you letters. You'll get all that stuff. You score them out. You watch them out. You ask them, how many trials have you won? Have you worked with, you've got to ask those questions. The key is this. You got to protect yourself, just like any other crime. Comes to your window, says he smells alcohol. Now you know. Am I free to go? Oh, of course not, because it's a DUI investigation. So here's my license and all that stuff. Oh, you would like me to do reindeer games and all this? No, thank you. I'm not on probation and I'm an adult. So I don't have to do it. And I don't have to blow into your box. But I know that I must test. And that's all I want to do is get a vein up here, get a phlebotomist in here, take this blood. That's all I have to say. You'll get out. You'll get a court date. You'll get your attorney. And then you will get the reports and you will see where you stand, especially the lab reports. Remember, alcohol metabolizes at a rate of 0.02 per hour, comes in, leaves. Time is the only way to eliminate time. So if in fact you say anything about drinking, it better be that you just wiped away the drink off your mouth right before he pulls you over. And that's all you've got to say. That means you just had alcohol. That alcohol has to metabolize in the next hour. By the time they get you down and test you, you should be 0.02 higher than what you were at the time of driving. That may put you under 08, may put you at 08. But it gives you something to fight because you're rising. So, under those situations, yeah. Now, what if you're 2, 3, you're really, really high, okay? I mean, the high amount, really, Some people, I'm seeing everything, some people are very high and they seem normal. But if they're that high, of course, it's going to reduce your opportunity to win in either side. There are defenses, but once it gets to be 1-0 or higher, that's where the troubles comes in. And then you just got to know this. DMV will take your license and they can do it 2 times. Why? There are 2 things going on. In court, they can only take your freedom. You can get a fine, do a little work project, turn that work project, turn the fine into work project, 4 days, and you get rid of a $2,000 fine. So yes, I want to do work projects. My first offense, no accident, no high BAC, no refusal went on. I might have been a 1.2 up to 1.5. Up to 1.5 is a high BAC. Makes you do the 6-month alcohol program rather than the 3. But all you're going to get is maybe 5 days of work project. Do the work project. Turn the fine into that. Much easier, much cheaper. Because you can't pay for work project anymore. That's one of the fees that have been waived as of 7/1. So that's the way your DUI will probably come through the system if, in fact, you're high enough to get the conviction. With that conviction, though, no, DMV will be notified, and DMV will automatically take a 6-month suspension. Now, here's the key. Let's say over in the DMV land, you lost 2, but you lost much earlier because they move fast. So your suspension started after 30 days of being suspended, or your suspension started, and after 30 days, you can get a restriction. But the court case is still going on, and it's been 4 months, and now I'm on restrictive license because I needed to drive over here. I only have to do that 5 months, but the court case is still going on. But eventually, the court case ends, and I'm already driving on a restricted license with DMV. These two things must sync together, because you find yourself in a situation where you're on a restriction over here because of the administrative take of your license. And then the criminal case kicks in because COVID, and it takes 2 months to get to court. And then you get your lawyer. Now it's 4 months into it. You didn't think about the DMV hearing, so the suspension's going, but you asked for a restriction. And over here, though, there's nothing going on. And this is into this 5th month. And now this goes on. Another 6-month suspension can kick in. That's why it is. And really, you'll get an immediate restriction. Sure, you'll get that. But you've been restricted 5 months. Now you've got another 6 months restricted. So it's always important to know that when you get a DUI, and I don't want you to get one. Remember, I said, don't get one. That's the best way to prevent it. But if you get one, you keep that pink slip, you call DMV within 10 days to get your hearing. They can never suspend your license until they have a hearing. It's called a stay of your license, and they'll send the police report. So you do that to preserve this side of the railroad track. This side of the railroad track would be the court, and you may not get to court within a few months, and DMV would get there much quicker. So your lawyer has to try to sync the two together, meaning whatever happens here, it's going to affect here. Whatever happens here, it's going to affect here, so that if I suffer a suspension, I'm talking about first offenses now, second offense, third offense, same things will happen, just higher prices to pay. First offense, 6 months, or 4 months on the DMV side, but you can get a restriction, and then you have to be on restriction for 5 months. So what does that sound like? 6 months. Sync them together, you do one time. You don't sync it together, you're going to start one before the other, and you may have to do one and exactly another. So that's why they run like railway tracks, and they never come together. And that's something that you've got to realize, that there's two things going on when you pick up a DUI. So I've been talking about DUIs here, okay? Because they're very common. Everybody gets one, at some point. You can contact us at Courtside Channel on Instagram or Facebook. Our phone number, 916-384-8204. And I hope you watch this episode in the future. And if you are watching in the future, please always remember a few things. Number one, an officer pulls you over. It's the same routine I always talk about. Am I free to go? They'll say no. So take the 5th. Give them the license, take the 5th. Choose blood. Why? Breath cannot be collected. Forget the reindeer games and field sobriety tests and the little black box that you don't have to take as an adult and you're not on probation. Refuse them. If you're under 21, you got to take it. If you're on probation for DUI, you got to take the little black box. But you can refuse the field sobriety test. But you got to take the black box if you're on probation or under 21. Eventually, even though you do the right things an officer may have probable cause to arrest you, and they will. Remember, you want to do blood. Why? Because blood can be fought, unlike breath. Alcohol metabolizes at a rate of 0.02 per hour, meaning it will come in or it will fall at 0.02 per hour. So as long as they test you within 3 hours of driving, they're going to use that. So you never want to talk about how much you had to drink and when, because you can say you had to drink, but it was hours before, but yet you test a 1.0. That means you were a 2.0 hours before, and they will still get you. The key is to exercise your rights just as I tell you to do for any criminal case. And you watch out for that DMV action that's coming. And know that the pink slip is a DMV form that you call the number on it to preserve your license until you get your lawyer and you fight both arenas. Lawyers are going to send you stuff. You got to pick one. You can go with the best or the rest. So I hope we learned a little bit about DUIs. I hope you can go back and you watch this or show this to your friends and, shoot it around. Because it's pretty important. And I'll tell you something. There's another side of DUIs. And that side is that some people drive drunk. Some people drive under the influence. And they hit people and they kill people. And we don't want that either. That's why we're trying to come up with options like Lyft and, the other driving services and things like that. You want to be a responsible drinker to know what your limits could be so that you're never pushing them. Because the alcohol is going to tell you can drive. Common sense will tell you that you can't, but common sense loses against alcohol. So be cognizant, because I don't want to be on the road hit by a drunk driver. It's happened before, and it's probably happened to a lot of people. So you want to eliminate this crime if you can. Eliminate it always. But the problem is alcohol is legal. Driving's legal. You can drink and drive, just not to a level or to a point where it affects your ability to drive unlike a sober person. So I hope you learned something. I know I got to go now. It's been fun. Carmen will be back next time at Courtside with Lawman and Carmen B. She just had to leave this evening, and I thank you, those who were listening tonight. But tell everybody about DUIs, because we got to avoid them. And if we don't avoid them, then you got to learn how to fight them. One big thing, never refuse a test. Always test, but make it blood, because it's much easier to deal with. So hope you take those clues to mind, but be out there and be safe, because, you never want to lose a life to drunk driving. Never want to do that. Got to do everything we can to not have that happen. But then again, we don't want you to suffer a criminal conviction when you shouldn't either. All right. Thank you for listening in to Courtside with Carmen B and Lawman. Of course, it's just Lawman here today, but Carmen B hopefully be back next week, 6 o'clock. Catch us, Courtside channel, Instagram, Facebook, email, Courtside podcast at comcast.net. All right. Take care, and please have a wonderful evening.